Good morning. Thanks for coming early to attend the KSDE facilitated networking session. We appreciate you coming. In the agenda, we said today that we would have Matt Krehbiel talk about science, and that Jeanette Nobo would be doing some other curriculum work with us or explaining stuff. Her part of the agenda has been moved to this afternoon, so we've got all this time for Matt. So let's welcome Matt, and Matt, thanks for being willing to do it.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here today to have this chance to talk about course mapping and course sequences at middle school and high school, look at the data that we have, and we're also going to be collecting some data from you as we go through this process. Just real basic background. I think almost everybody in here has had this, but just so that we are all on the same page. That this process of the standards development was a multi-year process, first with the K-12 framework for science education that sort of updated the research base for what we know about science and science learning from the mid-90s when we last had sort of a national science standards piece until now. That's the K-12 framework for science education. Hopefully all of your implementation plans are rooted in that, because that is the research base, and it's also the vision for what we hope to do with science education. The standards then are built off of that. And that was a process that Kansas was a lead state for and had a huge impact on. And we could go into that for a long time, but we're not going to do that today unless you have questions about that. The place where we are now is that far side of that arrow diagram where we're talking about what does this mean for curriculum, what does it mean for instruction, what does it mean for assessment, what does it mean for professional learning and things like that for our teachers. If you don't have my info, here it is. In the last 6 months, maybe a little bit more, I've started tweeting, which is a new thing for me. I didn't really do that. I was sort of late to it. I didn't really see the point of it, and now I love it. So as I come across resources and things like that, that's probably the first place I kick it out. So the @KS Science Guy is, if there's just a quick resource that I come across that I think is interesting, that's the place that I'll put it out before I put it out anywhere else. So if you're on Twitter, please follow me. I also use the hashtag SciKansas a lot. So if there's conversations that happen, you might see them there. And the last link there is to the KSDE Science website. And I'll pull that, if you don't have that stuff down, I'll bring it back up at the end as well. Also, this Prezi that I'm using for my presentation is public and available and reusable. There's actually tons of other things in this Prezi. If you just search within Prezi for Matt Krehbiel, you'll find this one and a bunch of the other presentations that I have. So, what we want to focus on today is what do we know works with implementation and science standards. And if you haven't yet, this is a free online, you can read it online, and or you can download it as a PDF for free. It's the Guide to Implementing the Next Generation Science Standards, put out by National Academies Press, National Research Council, Board on Science Education, the same people that put together the framework document. So it provides guidance on what does professional learning look like to make this happen, what needs to happen with curriculum materials, all sorts of things are in here. So if you don't have this, it's a great sort of, and I'm a little bit biased because I was on the committee now. I'm on the Board on Science Education now, which is really fascinatingly cool for me. And I was on the committee that helped to write this. Also, a lot of you in the room probably know George Griffith and John Pope, who reviewed this document and provided feedback on it before it was published. So next time you see him, you can have a hard copy and ask them for their autograph. So a couple of big things that need to happen if implementation is going to be successful. And a lot of these things aren't new. They are things that you know from math and ELA and also that apply to science and maybe even social studies. Don's not here yet, is he? Okay. Might even apply to that as well. That it takes leadership. And it doesn't mean just you as a leader, but it takes building leadership within your teacher educators. It takes communication. That means internally within your district, between faculty, between elementary, middle school, and high school. It means between what happens in your buildings and the parents in your community. I think that right now we know that we've moved out of this time period where there was a level of trust between what happened in schools and school districts and classrooms and our communities. And if we're going to get that back, it's going to take renewed effort and communication. Partnerships. In science, we have some unique types of partnerships that aren't available necessarily in some of these other places. We have Science Museum. We have children's museums with science focus. We have wildlife and parks people that we can make connections with. There's a lot of informal science education people out there. And of course, there's a lot of business and industry in Kansas that are focused on science and science-related fields that we want to bring to the table in the conversation. This was a fantastic lesson learned from the standards development process. If we wait till the standards are done and then bring the people to the conversation, it's too late. So if we wait until we've made all the decisions about what we're going to do with curriculum and all these things and then bring those people to the conversation later, it's too late, because then you're trying to convince them about what this is. When we bring them in early, we had business and industry, we had informal science educators as a part of our standards development team. When we bring those people in early, we end up with a better product at the end, and one of those products is the partnership. It's really important. Equity is a huge theme, not only throughout the standards. There was an entire separate part of the standards writing team whose entire focus, and they were embedded in each of the content areas, their entire focus was, does this work for all kids? And the fact of the matter is that the processes that are in these standards not only work for all kids, they work toward bringing those kids into the conversation. Kids that are frequently left out of science. This is more effective. Teaching the way that the standards sort of ask us to think about teaching is more effective with students who are English language learners, with students who have special needs, with students who are not typically brought into the conversation around science, that are sort of marginalized. This stuff works. That's why it's a part of the standards themselves. But your plans for implementation have to have that eye on equity. How do we address our concerns? Are we looking at who's taking our science courses at the high school level? Who's taking our high-level science classes? Are they boys? Are they girls? Are they white? Are they not white? Who are those students, and is there an issue in our district? And how do we address that with our implementation? There has to be an eye on equity, because all students will benefit from that. And then coherence. Coherence is really key. It has to be a K-12 conversation. If you really want to achieve the vision that we have set forth, it has to be a K-12 conversation. That means science, yes, has to happen at elementary school. There's actually some research that's starting to come out that says if you do science and social studies well at the elementary level, it's at least as good a predictor of their students' later ability to read as the reading instruction that they get in those early years. But yet we're not doing science at the elementary level in a lot of places. That's a big issue. We have a lot of differences, and what we're going to focus on the coherence part today, we're going to look at the middle school and high school piece. And what happens in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, there has to be a connection. The science and engineering practices and the cross-cutting concepts are these pieces that stretch across grades. If students aren't getting it in a coherent fashion across those grade bands, we won't get to where we want to be. It just won't happen. 6th grade has to know what 7th grade's doing, 7th grade has to know what 8th grade's doing, and all across that piece. And there has to be conversation between elementary and middle, and from middle to high school. If we don't do that, we won't get there. And all of that has to be centered in our vision for science education. So a big starting point for implementation plans is ensuring that you have a common vision for science education in your district. And a lot of you have been working on that, I know, because I've worked with you, or we have KSDE trainers, science trainers that have come out and worked with you. The really cool thing about that vision part is I've worked with hundreds of teachers in the last couple of years now. It's ridiculously consistent. In fact, I've worked with teachers and administrators and parents and all sorts of folks, and when they talk about what their vision for science education is, it's this stuff. Okay, so this is actually a Wordle from those pieces. It's on the KSDE Science website as well. This is what our teachers want for our students. So then we have to think about in our implementation planning, are the decisions that we're making, when we make those decisions about the course sequence, about all those things, does that move us toward that vision? If it doesn't, maybe not the right decision to make. So it has to be guided by our vision for science education. Okay, today we're going to focus on just a small piece of coherence here. What happens with those middle school and high school pieces? We're going to look at some data, some of which I got from the survey that we put out to you guys, and we're going to also look at some data that we have from our own course sequence, data that we collect through our KCCMS and Stuco data, and we're going to have some conversations and some questions about that. So first, we're going to look at our course sequence data. We broke this down by the census category, because we have that information. So these are sort of the categories that Tony Moss, who's back here, will help me if I say anything wrong. He helped me from our research and eval do some data analysis here, and these are some pieces. So it's connected to the district, but then what we're looking at here is that district in an urban, semi-urban, densely settled, rural, or frontier category. And again, these are the categories that are made by the census. And it's based on the population density. So we're going to take that as one of the factors. So you can't quite see all of those numbers from where you're at, but I'm going to explain them to you, and then I'm going to have you guess which courses these are. So what you have here, and I'll zoom in on them in a little bit, but what you have here is looking at the percent of districts from our data that are offering courses. And as you can, you can't really see, but almost all of these numbers here are in the high 90s. So these are 4 courses that are four of the most common courses that we offer in our district across the science courses at the high school level. I want you to talk at your table, see if you can figure out what you think those 4 courses are. So we have, and then the categories here are, if you can't see them from where you're at, the frontier, rural, so they're increasing in population density, with the last one being the average across the state. The percent of our districts that are offering these courses. So I want you to make a prediction about what these are. Go ahead and talk at your tables. Okay, who wants to volunteer what they think these courses are? Okay, we have one guess. Could you say that one more time?
Physics, chemistry, biology, and either general science or physical science.
Okay. Any other ideas? Physics, chemistry, biology, and then they couldn't decide on, I'm guessing that it was this one, whether it was general science or a physical science. Any other ideas? What's that? AP for this one? Okay. AP Bio, more specific. Any other ideas about what it is? I think I maybe heard another course from this table over here. Is it this table? Or maybe it was that table. Or yes, another possibility. Earth science. Other questions? Or other ideas? Okay. So this is biology. This is chemistry. This is physics. Offered. Now the data that we don't have, that we would love to have, is the number of students that are enrolled in these courses. So the data in our system is not fantastic in this regard. So if in the Stuco data entry, it's really good on the career and technical edge side. If people could refocus a little bit on these science courses, we would have better data to share back out to you. If you would make sure that in your districts that the number of students that are enrolled in these courses is entered correctly, then we could share back out, because I think that what we'd find is that even though physics is offered in a huge percentage of our districts, it's a small percentage of our kids that are actually taking it. Right? So that's an issue that we can't represent in our data, but I think it's out there. Sort of the nationwide average is around 20 to 25% of students take physics. So it's offered everywhere, but a small fraction of our kids are getting that. One of the expectations of our standards is all standards for all students. Again, it's an equity issue. This last course here is Earth and Space Science. We have other courses, and we have more data that we can share, but these are ones that I think show some telling patterns. It's one of the domains in our standards. Across our state, less than 60% of our districts even offer an Earth and Space Science course. 2 of the top 10 jobs predicted by 2020 are Earth and Space Science jobs. Less than 60% of our districts offer a high school Earth Space Science class. That's a huge disconnect.
Matt, though, I think you need to talk about the Earth Space course that's traditionally been there, or the Earth Space course that would prepare kids for the career you're talking about.
Absolutely.
All the Earth Space courses I've seen are basically regurgitated middle school science.
Completely agree. Because one of the other pieces that's hugely important there is that Earth and Space Science course is frequently the course that gets set up in districts as, this is the course that you take if you're not successful at science. That is a huge equity problem. And it's a huge disconnect from preparing kids for what their careers that will be available for them in the future. We don't think about that as much on the academic side of the house as we usually do on career and technical education. And I think that's a huge issue. So we're setting up what some of the big issues are, and then we're going to look at more sort of the course data pieces and what people are doing and what they're changing. But if you're not thinking about this carefully as a district, you may not be doing what's best for kids, and you may not be doing something that's aligning with that vision of what we hope for all of our kids. There are challenges in doing this, don't get me wrong. We need to start off with what the issues are and if we can move these things forward. I'm not going to make you guess on the courses here. This is the data around some of those AP courses. But look at the pattern that we see. So this is just some of the more common AP courses. We also have AP Environmental. And we have a few programs that are IB as well, some of the what we would consider some of our advanced. And this is not the whole scope of advanced science courses that are out there. We have somewhere in the neighborhood of 66 different courses that are offered across the state. The pattern is pretty telling, however, on student opportunities. So I wanted you to think about talking about here a couple of questions at your tables. Clarify for each other that you understand what that pattern is in the same way. Think about whether or not it's an equity access issue. If not, why not? If so, what are some possible solutions? And I'm going to highlight this word right here. Do your best at your table to talk about what solutions might be to that problem. It will be really easy to fall into, this is why this isn't happening. Try to, if you're at your table, try to be that person who sort of nudges the conversation and says, okay, we get it. It's tough. It's hard. What are some solutions to this problem? So focus your ideas on some solutions, and we'll share those back out in just a minute. Go ahead and have that conversation at your table. Okay. I'm pretty sure that with all the minds in this room and all of the great thinking that I've been hearing at the tables, that in that 10 minutes we have now solved all of our problems. So let's hear a little bit about some of the solutions, if I could draw you back real quick. Somebody that would like to just sort of address that first question about what is the pattern and whether, sort of the two-pronged question, what is the pattern and is it an equity issue? Somebody that would like to share their response to that with the group. What is the pattern that we see in these courses, and is it an equity issue or access issue? George.
Matt, one of the things that we noticed was the urban had much higher representation, and yet when you think about the other categories, there wasn't much difference in those, which was kind of surprising. We expected there to be a lot, because we're talking, very, very small compared to others. So across those, we didn't see it as much of a difference other than the urban being way out there, which was kind of surprising.
Other thoughts or ideas? Yeah.
One of the things that I noticed being, I'm not sure the definition of frontier, unless that means anybody west of Hayes, but I'm not exactly sure about that. But one of my concerns that we talked about a little bit was almost kind of like I guess it'd be our old school finance formula, not the block grant, but the old finance formula, to where we talk about the issues of not only equity but adequacy. Because when you maybe do in a rural or a frontier school, you may deliver that through IDL or some other. Well, if I'm a physics kid and I don't get to do the labs and I don't have that opportunity, I have equity. I have the opportunity to take the class. But is it the same? So you have an adequacy issue too.
Great. I heard in there hidden one potential solution, which is IDL sorts of courses. But when you do that, you still have to have a facility. If you're really doing science the way that we hope you're doing science, you have to have a facility where you can do some sort of interaction, where you can actually have the students engaging in the science and engineering practices. But we have that equity issue that's not just about, is the course offered? Can they take the course? But what is the quality of that course? And is the student able to do that? And we have that whether or not it's remote or not, but it's certainly a factor in that remote piece. Yeah. Other pieces on that first set of questions. Yeah.
Over here, I was just going to add to that by also suggesting that with some of that coursework, many of our teachers who have taught that coursework are retired, and sort of building the sort of legacy, the teaching legacy for someone to move into those high-level AP courses, needs to be considered.
That actually gets us back to this whole implementation thing, which the implementation is not necessarily, a component of that is moving from one set of standards to another set of standards. But we can also use implementation as a lever to change the conversation about what our teaching profession is, right? We can use, if we communicate correctly and just sort of beat down the doors in our communities about what this is all about, they get a better understanding of what education is all about. And then maybe that sparks an interest in somebody to be a teacher who hasn't thought about it as a profession before. So all those things are a part of, we want to have multiple purposes as we're moving forward with these things, so that we aren't just moving from one set of standards to another set of standards, but that we always have in the back of our mind those huge issues. Like in science, teacher shortages are a huge issue. Not just now, but if you've looked at the data that Steve Case has put out over the last couple of years, that he's taken data from KSDE and sort of analyzed that, the percentage of teachers that either have their 85 points or will in the next couple of years in science is a pretty high proportion. That's a big issue. We can potentially address some of that in the longer term fashion and how we do implementation. That won't maybe solve the, I need to plug that one hole in my district next year, but maybe that gets us to a point where people start wanting to be teachers. I'll hop forward here just a little bit, back to where we were. Other ideas of solutions to this issue that we have sort of, I think the conversation is there anybody that does not think it's an equity or access issue? I haven't heard that yet, so I just want to check. It's okay if you do. I'd love to hear from somebody that has that perspective if you're out there. What are some solutions? Yeah.
In small districts, they'll co-op things like a school psychologist or some kind of gifted support. And I think because of the certification and also someone who really is not just asked to take this on because they're in a district, but this is what they want to help create as a mission for student learning. I think districts could look at hiring across in a cooperative fashion someone who's certified to teach AP Chem. I know I'm from north central Kansas, and sure, it's 22 miles between high school at one place to another, so it's 45 minutes of drive time, but for the benefit you would get, yeah, I think that may be a solution we need to look at.
So collaboration across districts, thinking about, in this case, in terms of hiring.
I think creativity allowances when it comes to that certification. For example, what about the possibility, let's say that you're going to offer it and your basic content's going to be kids using something like Khan Academy or something like that. How do you then report ECDS or LP, licensed personnel, whatever it is, how do you report someone who's your certified teacher for that? Because you're not actually going to have one on site, or even in a partnership like IDL, it's going to be a totally different model.
So different models on what a course means. Yeah. Other ideas? We heard, what are, since I'm sure this came up at tables, I mean, I'm guessing it did. I heard it at a couple of places. What are some barriers to addressing this? What makes it difficult? Why aren't we doing it already? Anybody? What might be some of the barriers to addressing this issue? Yeah.
One barrier is to get to this high level of taking any kind of the AP chart. There are usually prerequisites in a high school schedule. I know my child personally has had to double up on science. She's up to all this AP stuff. But she had to double up early in science, and a lot of kids can't double up. In small school, even in particular, the way things schedule out and what you where it's hard to double up. So part of our kids are getting the amount of courses offered, they can actually work their schedule and double up, because there's quite a few prereqs before you just walk into AP physics.
So master schedule is a huge piece. How do students navigate through, how do students make their course selections for science at the high school level and coordinate that with their other interests and their other needs for learning? Does anybody feel like they have, before we leave that topic, does anybody feel like they have a creative solution in master scheduling, something that's worked really well for them to do that? Does anybody have any master scheduling solutions? That might be a thing that we want to spend some time on in the future as a group, thinking about how do we solve that animal. Okay, go ahead.
So one of the things we talked about is that a lot of this begins in our elementary school. Where do we pull them out of for intervention time? Out of science and social studies. Kids already start behind. Middle school, high school teachers in science and social studies aren't used to that idea of intervention for the most part for their kids. You come to me, you do my work, read my material, digest good. Do my lab, it's great. So it's a small shift in thinking, and those teachers who are content focused more, science area, they may struggle a little bit more, but our teachers that are kid focused, who get this idea of intervention and practices for kids, I think they'll be fine. And it's a little system shift, but it's not a huge shift, it just takes a little time.
One of those questions that's really great to ask teachers when they get stuck here, because Sometimes you'll find some of us science teachers are really committed to our own disciplines, our own domains. A question that's really good to ask is, how is this sequence or how is this course set up better for student learning? And when you ask them to provide evidence to support their claim that it's better for student learning, so this is using our practices that we want them to do, so it actually models the practice, right? Ask them to provide evidence for their claim that this is a better sequence for student learning, or this is better for student learning, and that changes the conversation sometimes.
Your question on the master schedule, even the smaller districts, and I've seen that if you have the benefit, even in a small district, of having teachers that have the certification or licensure that allows them to teach a variety of different courses, you still may not be able to, or you might offer 1 year this particular course and there's a year that you're not able to, and the next year you offer it. But it does still create a real issue of planning well in advance for those students, of knowing not just what's offered next year, but looking and trying to plan their schedule of 4 years to get something that they're getting the courses they want. And we do have some students that change their plan in those 4 years too of what they want to do.
So what I think goes along with this is, because they have that prerequisite and we need to get through all those courses, and this is a money thing, I think Dale did just walk in the room, but we traditionally thought of summer as just getting your credit recovery. We haven't thought about it as acceleration. So if we have the opportunity to offer some summer type programming as a way to accelerate, because I'm in a smaller school and I want to get to this level, because all of that requires, as I said, you're going to have an initial biology or initial chemistry or initial physics course before you get to the AP one. You don't just walk right into an AP one course. So that might be a way to accelerate through some of those initial courses, and then, or even independent study those somehow.
Or it might be the place where it might be easier to do that cross-district part that you talked about earlier. That might be the place where you do the AP,
Yeah.
if that's the direction that you want to head, because it might be easier to do a cross-district course that brings kids together in the summer. Good ideas, good ideas. A couple more patterns that I want to look at. If you're from one of those districts, would you stand up, please? They're in numerical order. If you're from one of those districts, if you would stand up, I'd really appreciate it. If you're from one of those districts, please stand up. Okay, the other thing that I would like you to do as you're standing up, let's try sitting down, Lucas, I saw that. I'm still a teacher. I would like you to do this. Everybody? And this. And everybody else who's sitting down, do this. Now you can sit down. These are the districts that have already responded to the course mapping survey. So I have data from them that I can share with. If you did not stand up, I do not have data from your district. So in just a minute, I'm going to give you some opportunity to give me that data. I will send it back out, and even better than that, there's the bit.ly link right there. So here are two things that I would like you to do. It won't take you very long. Since we're here together, and I know when you walk out of this door, your lives will slam down all around you. If you haven't entered this for your district yet, it basically is going to ask you, what are you doing with middle school science? Because one of the other things that we have is our course coding data at middle school level is really unclear as to what's happening. A lot of times it's just 6th grade science, 7th grade science, 8th grade science. So what this will ask you is, are you doing an integrated science? Are you doing earth-based life science, physical science, those sorts of things? And in what order? And I'm going to share with you in just a minute the data that we do have from these districts and the patterns that we do see. But we only have about 40 districts that have filled this out to this point. So we need more to really be able to say, okay, what's really happening across our state? And how are we moving, or what are we moving? Because, again, this is one of those cross-district conversations that's really important. If we want to have that conversation of sharing resources across districts, then you're probably going to want to share resources, for example, with a middle school that has the same science sequence that you do, or a high school that is offering biology, for example, at the same grade that you are. Because it's a lot tougher if those things aren't similar. And what this will do is at least help you find those people. At the end of this, I'm going to give you a link that'll show you all the results from the table, and as people continue to add, you'll still have access to that table. So if you want to go out and find a district, and it has the contact name for the person in the district as well. So if you want to go out and find a district to partner with that has a similar sequence, you'll be able to do that really easily. Just you'll go into this Google sheet, you'll sort it by the information that you're looking for, and you'll be able to find that person and contact them and start that conversation. Because the reality is that just like it won't happen if K-12 don't work together, it won't happen if we don't start to do a better job of working across district lines. We should not have to reinvent curriculum. We should not have to reinvent course sequences and all those things in every district. It's valuable for teachers in our district to be a part of that conversation, but they could be a part of that conversation in a cross-district meeting. So, if you have not yet entered that data, please do so now. If you've entered that data and have it all figured out, what I would ask is that you spend a little bit of time looking at this NGSS implementation guide, which is online. So this is this guide to implementing the next generation science standards. This link will take you to the place where you can either read it online or download the PDF for free. So if you're not at a computer, get around somebody who is at one and take we're going to give you 8 minutes to do one of those two things. And then we'll look at this last data, and then we'll wrap up and get out of here. Well, wrap up and start the day, right? Also, if you weren't the person that, actually I'll go ahead to just link down here. If you weren't the person that entered your data, or if you were and haven't gotten the results yet, that's, if you want to go see what people have entered, that's where you go to see what people have entered. So that's the responses from the survey. So if you're entering the survey, stay there. If you've already entered the survey, or if it was somebody else from your district that you entered and you want to verify that, check out that link. And you can see the responses that are now pouring in, as well as the ones that were there before. I'll also send this out again to the full district, or to the curriculum leaders. So you have this link and all of these links that are a part of this presentation, the link to the presentation, and the links to the form so you can fill it out. If you don't know that information, want to pass the link for the form on to a department chair or something like that, that's fine. We're in that transition phase between where we were and where we're going to be. So this is what was happening before at the middle school level. Again, just from the 40 folks that we have replies from at this point. In middle school, I think, because you can do high school, middle school, or both. So I think we actually only had 35 of those gave me middle school information. Sometimes it was the high school science chair, and they were giving me just high school information. So about 46% of our districts, of the ones, again, of the 40 reporting, are using a domain specific, so they have, in some order, physical science, earth space, and life at the high school level. That data about which order they're using is in the responses spreadsheet, so you can find somebody that has the same one. About 31%, again, this is the before picture, about 31% are using an integrated one, and then about 23% said it wasn't one of those specifically, that was something different. So we have some interesting sequences. Those are described. There's a place where they filled out and described what that is in the form.
Yeah.
If we dig into that domain thing, it looks like the biggest chunk, and then we dig in there and we realize that that's actually split up in several different ways. The biggest two chunks there are Earth space, 6th, 7th life, 8th physical, and physical life, Earth space. And then we have a couple of other variations within that. But you can find that information, again, in there about who's doing what. So this information is only valuable if it then plugs you in with another district that has a similar sequence to you so that you can learn from each other. You know, if you're bringing somebody in for professional learning, then you can collaborate with that district and come to the same place and have some conversations that are valuable if you're working with districts that have the same sequence that you do. Are people changing? Huge chunk of people don't know. Right? So sitting down and having this conversation is really an important thing to have happen. There's lots of resources that we can use to support that. So if you're interested in having that conversation with your teachers, I was lucky enough for those, I think most of you know this already because I've said it to this group before, but to have been on the lead author for Appendix K for the standards, which is about this very issue. How do you course map? What's that? A lot of them has to do with what changes your high school grades. Yeah. So yeah, most of the conversations that we've had, I've gone out and had with districts are 6-12 conversations around this course mapping, because that connection needs to happen. And then of course your broader conversation about science ed needs to be K-12.
Well, the progression and how those progressions work across, you have to understand how that works and how they work.
Absolutely, absolutely. The research is pretty clear that there's not a sequence that is the perfect sequence. Actually, it's really ambiguous. It doesn't sort of lay out that we would be advocating for one of these particular sequences if there was one that we knew from research works best. We don't know that. Hopefully, with this implementation, we can find that out. So again, another reason to collaborate with districts. Looking at high school, one of the sort of interesting questions that we can look at, again, this is just from the subset of 40, so this is not the entire scope of the state. It's not a sort of, it's a convenient sample at this point. Of those folks, the biggest chunk of them, most of their students take bio at 10th grade. The next biggest chunk is at 9th grade, and then there were some folks that had some different responses. Sometimes it was 9th, 10th, or some folks are integrating even at the high school level. So some of those biology concepts are across a couple of grades. When is chemistry? This one actually sort of surprised me. I thought it would be at a different place than it is, but most of them, it's indicated that most of their students take chemistry at 11th grade. Physics, mostly seniors. And Earth space. This follows what we saw in our course data, right? The biggest chunk, we don't offer an Earth-based science course. The next biggest chunk is a 9th grade course. And then we have a few folks that it's an elective course, or that content is integrated into other courses. So that sort of gives you some more data. The more data we get from you, the better we can tell this picture, and the better we can connect you to other districts. So if you haven't, as a district, filled out that survey, please do so. If you have, again, here's the link, and like I said, I'll send these links out if you don't have time to write them all down. Go in there and mine that data and use it to help make decisions. Don't just your decision shouldn't be, I'm picking this sequence because this is what the other district is. Your decision should be around what's best for student learning. But one of those factors that might be best for student learning is if you have 6 districts in an area and the kids move around a lot between those districts, having the same sequence might be best for student learning. We might even get to the point where as a state we could have that conversation. Would it be better for us to all use the same sequence in terms of student learning? Because our kids move around a lot, and it would help them understand 6th, 7th, and 8th grade and be ready for high school. I don't think we're quite there on that conversation yet, but I think it's on the table, and hopefully with our next standards implementation, we can have that conversation and make a decision. Okay, we know a lot about what works in implementation. There's a lot of information in that book to help support you. There's a sample implementation guide. One of those pieces that is this course mapping, and hopefully we can keep providing you better data about what are people doing and connecting people across districts. I thank you so much for your time this morning, this conversation. If this brings up questions or ideas or solutions, please send them to me and we can have further conversations. I want to make sure that you're centering your implementation around your vision for science education And if you need my contact information, there it is. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Don't you like it when someone pushes you right up to the start of the meeting? George, I need your help. Figure out how to turn that on first. This is a pretty special group, the curriculum leaders. You're really the only group in the state that we these are your meetings. You just happen to have them in Topeka and invite us to come and hang out with you. But this is a group that is very unique, very close, very networking. So the two of you, thanks for being a part of it for so long. And how many, raise your hand if this is your first year in this group. All right, you know, I may not be around long enough, but one of these days you're going to be sitting there talking about your careers, you're retiring. So just this is a great group. So we appreciate the networking, but what you really do is drive our work and what we do. The thing I appreciate about it, and there's so many things I could thank you for. Many of them is well, you might remember the last time we were in this room, someone asked the question, and I just opened my phone up and saw that there was a bill being introduced on Common Core. The thing I appreciate about this group, anytime I know that there's a hearing or something's coming up, you're there. You get coordinated. You are the voice for Kansas kids, and I really appreciate that. That bill, by the way, was so bad that it was limping on its, but one thing I think that has helped us the best is, and I hope you get out there and you let your communities and parents know, we went live, Jeanette, was it in January? Yes. With a website that allows people to go in and look at the standards and give us the comments. And we make it very clear, I can't do anything with comments that we're turning kids into Hitler Youth. You know, that doesn't help. What we want is the public to tell us, how do we make them better? And I think that was one of the things that helped us out the most this session, was people were saying, well, wait a minute, how long have you had these standards? Well, we adopted the Math and English Language Arts in 2010. It's 2015. We revise them every 2 years, and we're starting the process of getting input. And they were like, well, someone told us you couldn't do it. Well, no, that must have been a myth, because we are. So, again, that will be open until sometime next fall, and we'll take all that information when we pull together our Kansas standards revision teams, and they'll have some input already to start with. So I think that helped out a lot. When you have people back home, if you do, that kind of get fired up about standards, say, well, go look at them. And you know what was great during the hearing was we passed cards out, giving them the link to it, and people were getting on, representatives were getting on, and they were looking at it, and they were saying, really? You're saying it has pornography, and we're looking at the standard, we don't see any, you know, so it just really deflated a lot of the stuff and let them know that we are proactive and making sure that we always revise to make sure that our kids are getting what they needed. So I do appreciate, though, that all of you, anytime I call Teresa, George, any of you, and say, hey, bang, you go to work. So that's a huge value of this group, to be able to speak on behalf of your kids. So with that being said, we've got a full agenda. We have a lot of stuff to get to you. You've been sitting here for an hour. You have 1 minute. Dale will be here. Refresh what you need. Those along the sides, there's a lot of empty chairs out here, but at the same time, the front of every table is empty. So just grab a chair, pull it over, but we want to make sure that everybody's sitting around and being engaged in the conversation. So let's take a quick break, whatever you need, and as soon as Dale gets here, we'll get started. Because they don't normally have this many people like us that are out sucking their bandwidth. So anyway, what I want to share with you, and if Dale walks in, then I'll finish it up during my portion, but I want to kind of walk through you where we're at with No Child Left Behind, or ESEA, Elementary, Secondary, and Education Act. I know this may not be as high on your radar, but we will live under it. I mean, we lived for over a generation under No Child Left Behind. And even though there were some good things about it, there were some really bad things too. Some pretty toxic things that we could cover later. But in Kansas, we are one of 40-some states that submitted a waiver, and we still live under that waiver. And I'm appreciative that the U.S. Department of Ed allowed states to move away from some of the toxic things that were under No Child Left Behind. But we do not want to live over the next several years under a waiver. It's just not good for us, because there's no clarity about where we want to be 6 years from now. We just submitted last week our updated waiver for 3 more years. I mean, it's just one of those things that there's no end goal. It's just like, well, here's what we want to do the next 2 years, 1 year. This one's 3 years. And what we submitted isn't a lot different than what we're currently doing, but I would rather live under a waiver than under the old law. But reality is, our president currently only has 2 more years. We have a Republican-controlled Congress, and I don't know whether Hillary or Jeb or whoever is going to be the next president, but I think there's a high probability whoever the next president is will get rid of waivers. Well, what does that leave us with? The old No Child Left Behind law. So, due to the last elections, we now have a Republican-controlled House and Senate. Both of them are going very aggressively to rewrite No Child Left Behind. The Senate's version is being led by a senator named, last name Alexander, and one named Murray. So when I refer to Alexander and Murray, that's the Senate version. The House version is being led by Representative Klein. All right, they already submitted theirs. The Senate's was introduced earlier this week, and they're having a hearing next week. And Teresa, remind me, or remind yourself, we'll send out a link to where you can go, and if you want to at the bottom, you can click and see the whole 600 and some page, or you could look at the summary, which I'd recommend the summary first. But the state board a couple months ago unanimously voted to approve, and we sent a letter on to our congressional delegation, Roberts and Moran and them all, that we supported the Alexander one. Am I right or you're right? You're trying to get me out of here, aren't you? Okay. So anyway, I want to just kind of give you some things that are in that bill. And what I think is important is whatever passes, we will live with for the next decade. So I just want you to understand some of the high points and what we want in Kansas. The Klein bill has the same requirements for assessments that we've had in the past, other than it doesn't have AYP targets. But it says you will assess in grades 3 through 8 and once in high school every year in math and English language arts in the same footprint that we have in science. But it has more restrictions on what we have to do as far as accountability. The Alexander Senate bill says you will still assess in all of those areas, but states get to determine their accountability system. And in that, what weight does a state carry in that? And we get to design it. I mentioned with you the last time, we were just kind of getting to see some of the draft markups of it. But we'll get that, Teresa will, that link out to you, that you can kind of look at it. But what we would like to do in Kansas is to say, yes, the academic performance of our students is highly important. But it's just one of the things that is important. And we get away from the No Child Left Behind era that you can check all 11 boxes if you want, and you can be doing great things, but if you don't hit the target 2 years in a row, you're failing. Anybody in here from Kansas City? Okay. It was just announced last week. Emerson Elementary School was recognized nationally as one of the leading elementary schools in school reform across the nation. They went, let's clap our hands for Kansas City. They went from percent in English language arts from here to here. And under No Child Left Behind, what were they labeled as? Failing. The new system says we get to determine our own. And in the waiver, remember, we went to AMOs, basically looking at growth over time, and everybody's growth trajectory was unique to your building. And Emerson Elementary turned into our #1 highest reward school for growth. That's what we want. We want to design our own accountability system, but at the same time, that was just based on one test, one measure. The other thing that's in the Alexander plan says we also want you as a state to consider looking at, again, graduation rates. But what about some post-secondary? Set as goals, maybe some increase in the percent of your kids that go on to a 2-year, 4-year technical into the military, things that happen after. Or focus and set goals on reducing the percent of your kids that have to take remedial coursework when they get the, So looking at, and that's exactly what we want in Kansas, is to have rigorous standards, quality assessments, measuring academic performance, but we also want to be able to get value in, if you have more kids graduating with industry recognized certifications, awesome, that ought to count. Maybe even as simply as, what if in a school district you had more kids graduating that have demonstrated somehow that they're academically prepared, or they've demonstrated technical skills, and they have some kind of employability skills as measured by whatever you choose. And we made that the goal. And everything else was just an indicator about whether or not they're on track to get there. So that's what we like about the Alexander plan, is that it allows us as a state, we still have a state assessment, but we get to determine our accountability and design it for Kansas, because I'll be honest, No Child Left Behind was not written for Kansas. Job, we could reduce the footprint for that and allow you 3 through 8 in high school to inform instruction, see how kids are growing, but we don't have a model, but that's why we like the Alexander plan, because it allows us to say, what do we want in Kansas? And where does the state assessment fit into that? It has to, but at what degree, at what level? Because I guarantee you, and I'll get into this a little bit later because Dale's here. You can come on up, Dale. You want to give him directions? She's not looking at me. You know, I remember, geez, how many years ago was it? My wife would sit in the bleachers, you know, cheerleading sponsor, one of those that we take advantage of everybody, and a lot of years ago, wasn't it? So, morning, Dale.
Morning.
You want this?
Great day to excel. Are you in part of that model? Excelling? Well, you sure got the board fooled. What's my topic? Let's talk about House Substitute for Senate Bill 7 first. You want to ask the questions? What are you asking about? What are you worried about? There's no money, so it don't make any difference. Next question. It's a few things to keep in mind. The court come down a year ago, I remember, and said you have to fund the LOB and the capital outlay. The legislature and House Substitute for Senate Bill 7 changed the law. And there's a new formula for LOB state aid and a new formula for capital outlay state aid. LOB is coming down $34 million. Capital outlay is coming down about $19 million. Now, this is significant because it's going to create some anxiety locally. When you pull the state aid down in LOB and your budget is frozen, in essence, you get the privilege of making up the difference or cutting your budget. You with me? And for some boards, that's going to be tough. It depends on the board and the community and all that. And the amount you're reduced, the formula goes it's broken up in 5 different categories. And the first 20% quintile, you get 3% cut. The next you get about a 5% cut, and it gradually goes up on what you get cut. And we put that all out there. The issue is, though, the LOB is frozen unless you do something. And who's going to make that up? And there's going to be some misnomers in this arena. Let me give you an example. Max, you got everything memorized. Let's say in Kingman, you're going to lose, I don't know, in the LOB, say $50,000. All right? His budget for LOB is frozen. So this year, at the end of the year, what's going to happen to his cash balance in the LOB? It's going to be $50,000 less than he thought it was going to be. With me? Then next year, he can't count. He's not going to get that $50,000 he lost. He's not going to get it back. So the bottom line is, he lost it this year, and his cash balance will go down. But next year, he's not going to get it either, so you kind of get a double whammy. And if you're a state aid district, you got to spend the LOB. If not, you got to give the state back money. And I won't go into all that unless somebody wants to. But are you with me on that? What happens? That's going to make some board meetings a little bit difficult. May want to, but how bad do they want to, and how much will that mill levy can they go up? One more thing. Is there anybody here, and this is not a good or bad thing. I'd never ask you if it was bad. How many of you are less than 30% LOB? All right. If you are, let me give you just a suggestion. I would highly suggest that you have your board at the next board meeting adopt a motion to go up to 30%. Authorize you to go to 30. That don't mean you have to go, but you have the authority, because if you don't do it by July 1, you don't get to do it. You're stuck for 2 more years. So you better get the authority now to go up to the 30, and then some boards will get nervous doing that because they think we're going to do that. But the bottom line is it gives you authority to. But if you don't do it by July 1, you're stuck done. You're done. And so if you're at 25%, you're going to be there the next 2 years. So the LOB budget's frozen unless you do something different. If you're at 25 and you adopt a resolution to go to 30, then you can go up to 30. But guess what? The state aid's still frozen. You're going to get the same state aid that you got this year. So if you're at 25 and you're going to get X number of dollars of state aid and you raise your LOB to 30, you eat it all. Somebody said, well, that isn't fair. That ain't got anything to do with it. Not anymore. With me? That'll make it, it's not fair. Nothing fair about it. The other thing that I want to make clear, that this is important, that LOB state aid you get this year, next year you'll get the same amount as a general rule. And we're going to try, I don't know if there's enough hours in the day to do this, we're going to try to hardcore that. So when your LOB get ready to do your budget, you put in your district number, whatever it is, it's going to pop in the amount of your LOB state aid you're going to get. But you have to transfer that amount to the LOB fund. Now, why would the legislature do that? Because if they didn't, you can leave it in the general fund and raise the mill levy through the roof. Now, if you're rich, it wouldn't make any difference. A mill or two might do it. But if you're poor, you're getting into double digits, really. Going to be in the double digits. So would some counties, like districts in Osage County, and there'd be a number of them. Jeff County, there'd be some double digits if you took it away. Kept it. So your LOB in essence is frozen, and you can go to the 30%. If you don't now, you better adopt a motion to do that. And you don't have to use it, but it'll be frozen. Your LOB state aid this year, except for overpayments, and I won't get into all that, but you're stuck for this year, next year, and the year following. Your general state aid will be the same next year as this year in essence. The insignificant changes. They programmed in a little change because the 20 mills might produce more, but with oil going down, I wouldn't put any money on that. So in essence, you're frozen in general state aid for next year. And who's in a district that's growing in enrollment? How much you growing, roughly? Well, make it up. I won't know the difference. 100 kids a year. All right? There are another 100 kids a year. All right? Who's going down about 100 kids a year? Somebody is. I can tell you that. Here's the bottom line. I want to make the point that those going up 100, you still get the same as prior year. Those going down 100, you still get the same as prior year. Anybody from Olathe? Olathe, what do you run 300 or 400 a year? Is that fair? Yes. 300 or 400 a year. So they got to somehow figure out how to eat that, where it's digestible. But that'll be difficult. I don't care who you are, or where you're at, because where you add also will be in a building where you're going to have to add teachers. It won't be a one where there's vacant slots. So anyway, that's very important. Now, one more thing. The capital outlay state aid is reduced. Those that get capital outlay state aid, who's poor? Nope. Okay. You guys that are poor. The capital outlay mill levy. You got a capital outlay mill levy? All right. The capital outlay mill levy, if you get state aid, it's going to go to the general fund. You may transfer it to the capital outlay fund or keep it in the general fund and use it for raising teacher salaries or operating costs, utilities, whatever. With me? That is significant for some districts. For some. I know one last year he didn't want to have a capital outlay levy because the board real sensitive on taxes, and he had a bond issue coming, so he didn't have any. Well, so now he didn't get state aid this year, so he's not going to get any the next 2 years. But there will be some among us today that will take their capital outlay state aid. It goes to general fund. They will not transfer it to the capital outlay fund. They'll leave it in the general fund, and they'll use it for operating costs. And you may do that. Capital outlay or LOB state aid has to go to the LOB fund. Now, let me tell you how convoluted this is going to get. Unless something changes when they come back to town, general state aid will go to the general fund. LOB state aid will go to the general fund and transferred to LOB fund. Why do we need to do that? Why can't we just put it in LOB and forget it? But anyway, that's the way we're doing it. Looks pretty. And then capital outlay state aid goes to general fund. Special ed goes to the general fund. Capers goes to the general fund. Now, we're going to try to hardcore that, and I don't know if we can do it or not, that the minute you get Capers money, if we can figure out a way to do that, it'll go to the Capers fund, because the time you get it done, it'll be on its way back to Topeka. Wouldn't it be easy to just go across the street and give them a check? But that ain't what the law says. So you're going to have about 4 or 5 different sources of revenue into the general operating fund. It's going to be convoluted and very difficult. That whole new ballgame. Particularly the piece where you can keep capital outlay state aid in the general fund and spend it for whatever you want, any operating costs. They could even use that money to raise curriculum leader salaries. Probably won't, but they could, couldn't they? Okay. Any other, what questions do you have? I wanted to be sure you're aware of those issues. Yes.
So we have a question around our ELL program. It's common to have somebody from KSDE come out and monitor the very critical records we keep in terms of certified teachers and our ELL students and their minutes with those teachers, and that's funded to a level of state funding in the past.
Did they ever find anything wrong?
Huh?
Did they ever find anything wrong?
Well, we're the poster child for what
Oh,
we're going to do to help
Oh.
get better. Yeah. But we're figuring it out. That template they finally built helped a lot. But we'd asked for that a couple years ago, and that's helped a lot. But that said, we're curious in terms of this funding. Is it going to come under what pot? Will we have an audit
All right.
come out? Will we keep these student records?
All right. For ELL, number one, you will report that into the KID system just like always. But we're not going to audit it much. With me? Don't make any difference. The reason we'll collect it because it may come back that we have to pay it. We may get money later, down the road. So we'll collect it, but we're not going to spend hardly any time auditing for bilingual. We'll audit at risk, but only for the purpose for food service, not for state aid. Don't make any difference.
Dale, one thing to add to that, though, is when Mike Murphy would come and audit, the state auditors are auditing because that used to have weightings in it. There's no weightings now. But nobody's relieved of any federal requirements. So all the things you're talking about don't change. It's just how those numbers used to affect your general fund budget did change because there's no weightings now. Career Tech Ed.
That's a big mistake in my opinion. A lot of people in Career Tech Ed had new pathways they planned to implement. They was counting on the weightings for Career Tech Ed. It's frozen. So to do that, be able to do that, you got to cut something else to get there. So that's very unfortunate because we say Career Tech Ed is such an important thing, then we turn around and drop the weighting. But we did that. We did that. For state purposes, the answer is yes. Let me tell you what else that could happen. Let's say you're getting some money for bilingual, and let's just pay for fun. They all moved away. You could spend that, you'll get the money anyway. And also, if the number doubles, you got to take care of it. So, and that's very, very unfortunate that that's the case, but it is. Some of you in the last few years, I heard one the other day, was it Shawnee Mission? Shawnee Mission, is there anybody from Shawnee Mission? They used to have low poverty, but their bilingual rate's going up rather significantly. And that happens in communities. Once it starts, it can grow rapidly. And the theory is, some of you have been around a while, some of you, the theory is, once you get the kids, those kids where they can speak properly, bilingual and write, well, we got it made. You know what? Somebody else takes their place. Because the number of kids in that arena is going up, not down. So there's a lot of migration in and out in that arena. So. Yeah, Larry, Randy? Special ed's not affected really. The formula stays the same except one thing. In the area of special ed, we believe that the amount per teacher will go up about $250. Transportation should go down, so special ed should go up a little bit. We're saying $250. And the reason for that is it was maintenance of effort at the federal level. Now, in state law, Randy, state law says it's 92% of excess cost. We're at about 78. Somebody wrote the other day, what is the Fed's requirement, or not requirement, what's the Fed law on special ed funding? Well, what it says, they can fund it up to 40% of the average cost of a regular kid. They don't say you have to. I just put an extra sentence on for it free. But the state law says 92%, we're at 78. I never heard any more out of it. It was some policymaker. Okay, and what other questions you got? That's a good one, though. Yeah. Supreme Court. Very good. May the 7th, we're going to have a hearing on this law and other changes they made. Let me tell you the big issue. And I mentioned this, I think, when we first started. Supreme Court said, remember last year, you will fund the LOB, you will fund capital outlay on the base amount per pupil, in essence. District Court, you go back and look at that, look at the Rose standards, and they're in statute now, and tell us what it takes to meet them. And they did that, and we changed the formula. So the District Court will hear the case on the LOB and capital outlay not funding it, plus there'll be some testimony on the new law and whether it complies. Now, the district court on some of that, I think, will come down within a reasonable length of time. Now, why would I say that? You know, I'm talking about a month, 6 weeks. The reason I say that is because they've already heard this case a time or two. And they're the one that said you had to, the Supreme Court said you had to do it. So they got Supreme Court order that says you have to do it, and we chose not to do it. So that will come down, I'm going to guess, somewhere around, mid-June, give or take a little bit. If they didn't have the background, it may take a lot longer, but they've got a lot of background on this, so I think they'll come down. Now, it'll be appealed within 15 minutes, give or take a couple, to the Supreme Court. It's probably already got drafted now, probably. But anyway, it'll be appealed Supreme Court. Now, here's the hard question. When will the Supreme Court respond? Say the district court responds in mid-June. When will the Supreme Court respond then? They could respond in segments. Say, we told you capital outlay and LOB. That's foregone conclusion. On the adequacy part, that's a different story. So, I don't know. You ask attorneys, there are probably some attorneys here, you ask an attorney when the Supreme Court's time frame might be on that, and they'll say the Supreme Court doesn't have time frame. They do it when they want to and when they are ready. So, but I think there's a possibility that on capital outlay and LOB, we could hear something mid-June on that piece. Good question, though. Yeah.
Any predictions on the capers issue? The retirees?
Capers. Just between us kids, not outside this room. You're not recording this, are you? What a mess. There's a little history to make capers. 20-something years ago, the chairman of the committee, they come down to the 85 points, a few things, said they couldn't compute what it was going to cost, the actuarial, so they said, we'll wait 3 years, we'll know by then, we'll give you a number to go from there. Well, he left, he wasn't there any longer, and they just kind of let it lag for about 20 years. Now we're way behind. I think there's a fair chance, there's numerous options. I think there's a fair chance they'll extend the working after retirement for another year. I think there's a fair chance of that. Now, if they don't do that, we got a chaos on our hands. One holy mess. There's probably 2,000 teachers that we have now working after retirement. And most of them are pretty good or you wouldn't offer them the job. Kind of the cream of the crop. And about 1,000 of them, estimated, is probably special ed. How in the world would you ever replace 1,000 special ed teachers? You know, and that's a number that I'm just estimating because a lot of them are in special ed. We're having trouble filling special ed positions now. Let me tell you something else in that arena, and I'll come back to that, keepers. In the area of teacher shortages, folks, we're there. Had district Northwest Kansas the other day, nice district, 500-600 kids, good people, good district. He had posted an ag position, science, and reading. No, English. 3. He didn't say how long, but he said he posted them for a while. Guess how many applicants he had for all 3? At the beginning of this week, none. He said he hoped to get an ag teacher in this week. I also was told that had a kid that, anyways, wants to be an ag teacher, and they was checking him out and all this good stuff. How many graduating, connected with K-State? There's 17 vacancies and 7 coming out. Somebody's going to end up in a hole. With me? We don't have enough to fill the slots. There's problems brewing also, besides special ed, I think, in math, science, counseling, career tech ed. And first thing you're going to say, well, I'm right over here in eastern Kansas, and the district I live in is a panacea. But you know what? Those kids coming out, they don't always agree with that. Because there's another district next door that, and the old saying, remember, you ever heard a board member say this? Well, that's the best job in town. That don't cut any ice with these young teachers coming out that are better than we ever were. They don't cut any ice, and so there's going to be golden opportunities, and that's something to worry about. And then you know what we're going to get into? Prediction. The superintendent, they don't want to go out and recruit from a neighbor. They don't do that. That would be a little bit unethical. So they'll have the principal have somebody call that person and say, don't forget our job's open. And when you get down to the 1st of August, there's going to be some things like that take place. With me? They won't call, but somebody else will call. So now back to capers. It's going to be interesting what happens. In the capers arena, they sold $1 billion worth of bonds. And that will go to capers. Then we got to pay those bonds back. But because of that, they're going to lower the rate for what goes into capers. We just computed this again last week, and the bonds, they're going to sell these bonds, so they'll lower the rates. So the dollars you see on the printouts is not accurate after they sell these bonds. Now, how they're going to make the bond payments is up in the air. With me? Because the capers contribution was going up over 2% of payroll. I don't think that'll happen. I think it'll come back down because we sold that $1 billion worth of bonds. And so now, how are they going to make the bond payments? That's up in the air. Don't know that. Now, there's another little bill in there, and I think it's maybe Senate Bill 300. Either 20, it's 2416. 2416. There's a bill you want to watch because, and this is so unfair. This bill, in my opinion, it deletes out of your average salary, your payroll, compensation for vacation or sick leave in your last year. And it depends on what kind of package you got, but takes out any sick leave or annual leave out in computing your final average salary. Well, that's, that can make quite a difference. We had a gal that I worked with forever. Tamara and I sat down and figured hers out a little bit, and the other day, that could run $1,000 a year. And you're losing capers, depending on the amount you got coming. She's got a lot coming in both categories. Teresa would lose the same amount. So doing that and changing the rules, near the end of someone's career is not really fair. But that's what it is. It pulls those things out of the average salary. You know what everybody will do? What they'll do, am I right? They will retire? Well, June 1st, you may be all right. Depends on what date they kick it in, if the bill passes. I don't know, Denise, if the bill will pass or not, but this is the second time it's come up. But it's really, really unfair to do that to somebody, to make a change in the middle of the stream. How likely? If they don't get it in a package deal, it won't fly. It's got to be in a package deal somehow. It won't fly on its own merits. So, Denise, but here's what's going to happen. When a teacher gets ready to retire, and they say, well, I'm going to quit June 30th, but I'm going to retire the 20th of August because they got vacation time or sick leave time, whatever, to run them that's legitimate from July 1 up to end of August. Well, that'll add another quarter. So I'm not real sure they thought through this very well. Well, I know they haven't thought through it very well. But that's what they'll do, people will do. They'll quit June 30th or whenever. Then they'll try, they might have enough time, and be a lot of them could carry them another quarter, which adds in. So Capers is up in the air, but I can tell you the rate's going down. The state contributes because of the bonds. Who's going to pay the bonds is up in the air. That's not, nobody knows that yet. They haven't decided. I think, though, that we'll get one more year. Here's the thing that bothers me on working after retirement is, why does the state care? Now think about that. You have to pay a surcharge of about 22 or 3%. Why isn't that a local board decision? If I want to pay that and I negotiate the salary with the teacher, why is it the state business? They don't lose any money over it. They break even. So why is it the state business? I don't know. Not real sure why they're getting into that. Okay, any other good questions you got? Yeah.
Related to the school finance formula, I don't have a lot of confidence in legislators that won't take the time to understand the current finance, or what we used to have in finance formula, just call it broke, designing another one that would be any better.
It's scary. I just reviewed with the Kansas City business community a little bit ago our current formula, and they more or less said, well, what's wrong with that? Because it responded to growth and enrollment, bilingual. It responds to at-risk, and that's big, transportation, whatever. So I don't know. That's a great question and of concern, but also, you would hope that whatever they do, that would be defensible in court. But I'll never forget one of a guy that I thought was the brightest guys I've ever been around, I think, besides Brad. But that was Robert F. Bennett. He was in the Senate and the governor. He had a quote that I just love. Whatever you adopt in the way of school finance, if you don't fund it, it don't work. You with me? And that's what we've done. We didn't, the base was 3,600 in 92, 93. And you know what it would be today if we'd followed the consumer price index? What would you guess? I checked it at the end of 2013. It would have been $6,001. Yep. $6,000. So it needs to have a system that grows with inflation. One more thing, too. We're paying our teachers 42nd in the nation on a national average. We're getting results in the top 10. That can't go on forever. That cannot go on forever. And here's what happens, too, and you know this better than anybody. You load up your teachers with more students. This is true in special ed, too, Randy, right? You load them up, and one time we had a teacher come in and said, I want special ed endorsement taken on my certificate. why? They don't make any sense. And I know, but he said, I want to go back to the classroom, and if I have special ed on there, they're going to ship me to special ed. I've been there 10 years. I'm kind of burnt out. I want to go back to regular classroom. So I said, take all my certificates so the administration can't ship me over there. Pardon? Are hard to find. Oh, yeah. Well, I tell you what. I gave you one example. It's a great district. Great kids. They're pretty good shape financially as far as valuation, that sort of thing. It shouldn't make a difference if you got an equalized formula. And I don't know, they're a 4A district school. Normally gets about 20 to 30 applicants on a principal, high school principal. This year, the high school principal, he got 5. 4 of them were brand new. One other one had been an assistant principal, I believe was the case. Well, that's a tough job. And if particularly in some of the lower, smaller districts, if you got young kids in a family, you're home maybe on Saturday and Sunday, but you're gone every night. I heard a board member say one time, I couldn't resist, I had to say something, but board member say, well, boy, you're lucky. You get to go all these activities free. I said, did you ever think, I said, kids are great. You ever think about supervising a bunch of adults? They're out there. And 1 or 2 of them's crocked a little bit. So, I mean, that high school principal, I think, is the toughest job in the system. I really do. Any other good questions? Brad's getting nervous or wants to go to the bathroom or something. Yeah. Well, the question is, will the innovative districts, Senator Abrams' bill, Senate Bill 294, will it get through? In my opinion, no. For example, not the way it is. And the reason is, one of the reasons is, some of the districts have to make a special mill levy to send in to finance the others. And the big kahuna in the room said, if you do this, we're dropping out. 10.9 million. So I don't think it'll make it. And the other thing is, Randy, it has not got out of the first committee yet. Not getting out of the first committee at this late date, it don't give it too good a shot. Maybe down the road, there's some good ideas in it and all that, but that bill won't make it this session as it is drafted now. Any other good questions? Brad, I'm sure my time's up about 10 minutes ago.
I'm sure you're right.
I didn't even know how much time I had, probably 3 minutes. All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Well, I could go without saying, but I'm not going to. Dale hired me at the State Department 9 years ago, and I'm glad he's 9 years later still here with us, leading us through this. I couldn't imagine going through everything we're doing without Dale. So he is the greatest public servant Kansas has ever had and probably ever will have. So thanks, Dale. Okay, I've got just a few minutes before Susan and Bill start. I just want to kind of, and if we have time at the end of the day, I want to be able to field some questions on this, but Randy and I went on a tour, and Dale joined us when he wasn't across the street by the legislature. I honestly believe if we do not change the conversation in Kansas about how we define success and what we want for kids, we will continue to get the same results that we have. And in order to do that, we went across the state, went to 20 different locations, sometimes a couple of them in the same town, had close to 2,000 people attend and provide input. And Tony's standing back here. We took all of that information, and we're working with K-State. They're providing us some software, some really smart people like Tony, to take, and a lot of you in here attended those, and we appreciate it, but we want to take what you said, close to 2,000 people that represented, we had parents, some business people, so, you know, it was a whole host, students, and what you told us what we need to do. And I don't know how much time we have, or we don't have a lot, but Tony and our research staff, working with K-State, is taking all of your information. They gave us a software program that you can analyze qualitative data. For those of you like me, someone had to explain to me the difference between quantitative and qualitative, and really working with what did you say. And as we design a whole new system, and we talk about how we want to design an accountability and system through No Child or through ESEA, academic readiness is important. But what we're kind of seeing right now, it might be 25% of the importance. What weighting, what value, what other skills? Tony was going through it, and the number one, correct me if I'm wrong, thing that we're pulling from this is the word skills, and then breaking that down to, well, is it communication? Is it technical? What? So we're spending a lot of time going through your information that you shared with us, because we want to come back to you and say, with a high degree of certainty, this is what you told us was important. We're starting in 2 weeks, we're going back out on a second tour, and we are hitting chambers of commerce. We're going to Pittsburgh, Wichita, Lawrence, Manhattan, Dodge, maybe, you know, we're going all over the state, and we specifically want to hear, what does business and industry say? How does that align with what you're saying? Because if we don't change the conversation, number one, and number two, we need next legislative session, not Randy, not me, not you. We need everybody. I want the president of the Board of Regents. I want the president of CERNA, Cargill, Boeing, or no longer, you know, Spirit. We want Kansans standing up in front of our legislature and says, this is what will drive Kansas's economy. This is what will close the gap between the jobs that require high skills, and, you know, they're not going to listen to me. So all the things that we're dealing with, there is hope, but it's going to take us getting people from all over the state. We can analyze the data that we got. Tony's looking at it and saying, well, did the people in Kansas City say the same thing as the people in Garden City or in Chanute? Or it's an amazing software program that allows us to massage and look at it and get to the point where we're confident this is valid, this is what you said, and this is what business said. But when it's done, our state board will then come together and put their goals together, aligned to that. We'll design a system, and we'll go to the legislature with people that have more weight than I do and say, let's get serious about this. If you truly want to leave a legacy in this state 15 years from now and say, you know what, Kansas is the most thriving state in the nation, 15 years from now, they can say it's because we funded for every kid to have universal access to early childhood. I mean, that's the elephant right there. And we've got to make people quit looking a year or two. There's a lot of things throughout the whole pre-K through secondary, but we can't set base goals on 2 weeks from now or 1 year from now. We got to have, and it can't be me. It has to be Kansans saying, this is what we want for Kansas. And we have the research. Tony and his team and with K-State are putting together to say, you want to save the state millions, do this in early childhood. It's going to take a few years, but so anyway, that's why we're going on this tour. That's why we're going out there, because the people that make the decisions have to hear from Kansans. It can't be decided in Topeka. It's got to be decided out across the state. So, Tony, I know we're out of time, but any questions on that?
How does this work that's being done apply, whether Alexander's work or Klein's work is accepted? What you described earlier, this meeting.
That's why we like the Senate's or Alexander's bill, because basically, think about what we did in Kansas with teacher leader evaluations. We didn't say all of you had to use KEEP or McCrell or whatever. We basically said, as long as you meet these guidelines, you choose it. You could even design your own. What we like about Alexander's, if they say, for example, you have to be able to identify your low-performing buildings. That'll be a requirement. We'll still have priority and focus. But honestly, at a state level, I could do that with just one set of data in you. I don't need every, so if they give us the guidelines, you have to be able to identify low-performing buildings. You have to be transparent in disaggregating and reporting your data. We can do that, always have, always will, but we get to design it. That's why we like the Alexander plan, because we could design what we want in Kansas. So it works perfectly because you're telling us what we want in these tours. We have got to get business partnered with us better. So we're going out to hear from them, because they're going to beat us up a little. But after they beat us up a little, we can say, okay, what specifically are the skills that our kids are missing, and how can you partner with us to make it better? And I guarantee you, business, they want to have a conversation with us, and they will. And then hopefully partner with us. So that's where we're at with the whole tour thing. It aligns perfectly with, the worst thing would be, we do all of this, and then we live under No Child Left Behind. That puts it all back on. Yeah, but it's about the test, and we don't want that. So it aligns perfectly. So with that, I'm 2 minutes behind. If we have time later, I don't know what Tony's schedule is, but we've got another month or two of really going through what you told us, because we want to get to the heart specifically of what you said a 24-year-old needs to look like, what our role is, and what higher ed's role is, and how we can make that a seamless.
Hey, Brad,
Yes.
if you have time to talk about it later, will you talk about the indicators in Senate Bill 294 and how that relates to kind of what you're saying?
Remind me what 294 was.
That's the one where the innovative districts have a separate finance formula.
Okay.
And the success index.
All right, here's the Innovative Districts bill, Senator Abrams. There's some things that I like in it, but here's the difference, is we would like to design an accountability system, which will eventually be our accreditation model, that looks at, think about it. There's a lot we know about kids before they graduate. Are they on track academically? Do they have the socio-emotional? Are they graduating with credit hours earned? There's a lot of indicators. There's also data that tells, and we know, how did your kids do after they graduated? And that's what that bill focused on, is rewarding you through a finance formula that if you can increase the percent of your kids that go on to post-secondary, think about this. Senate Bill 155, a couple years ago, incentivized, that's the career tech ed one. As soon as that bill came out, we had like 540 kids in Kansas graduate with an industry recognized certification. And it was just kind of wobbled around that number for a while. As soon as that bill came out, last year, we had over 1,400. So as soon as you incentivize something, either through financial or whatever, there it went. So what yes, Jay?
I just wanted to clarify that 540, those are only the incentivized credentials, not all the credentials in Kansas.
Yeah, just,
We have a list of 22 that are incentivized in Kansas. We have another list like Microsoft Office or OSHA, safety skills. Those are certifications that are not incentivized in Kansas, but yet they are good for kids. So just wanted to...
yeah, but the point is, what Abrams is trying to do, and he wanted to pilot with the innovative districts, is if we incentivized things like increasing the percent of your kids that go to post-secondary, you know, could we, because here's the kicker. I can go out right now on the high school feedback report, and I can see what percent in Kansas, you can see your school district. I can see the whole state. What percent of our graduates since 2007, so I can see 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. We'll have 13 loaded here pretty quick. What percent of your graduates showed up somewhere the next year in a 2-year or 4-year, a technical, in-state or out-of-state? What do you think? Cross state. Short of time, 78%. And guess what? It's been the same. All the great things we're doing, it's been the same. 28% on average since 2007, all of those years, needed remedial courses in math or English language arts. Almost the same. And the percent that successfully completed their first year, about 66%, the same. We haven't moved the needle on that. So what Abrams, the thought of it is, if we incentivize things like that, could we see more kids going, fewer kids? So that's the concept behind it. But like Dale said, it's not really going anywhere right now. But there's a difference. We want to base accreditation on things other than just academic, just on one test. We want to look at those other types of indicators. They're taking it to the step that you might get funded based on that. Right or wrong, that's what that concept was about. I don't want to put a lot of pressure on. Tony, come on up here. And Susan and Bill, you guys might as well work your way up here too, because
all that data has to be coded, and that's what's going to take a lot of time. So we got 2,000 respondents, and Brad's going to go bring us some more. So it's going to take us quite a while to get it coded. And one of the things that we were talking about with the expert at KU is we want to be sure we do it in a way that's unbiased and doesn't lead to any distortions of the message from the folks in the field. So we're going to be very careful about it too. So I'm going to say 2-3 months before, if I can get away with that. We'll see. Two. Well, I'm going to ask for an extra one just in case, but we'll see how many responses you bring in from the business community. You know, they may overwhelm us. So
at the same time, once we finished the tour, we opened it up online. And we have over 100 people that have gone in and given us input online. So But again, I don't, man, those were great conversations. But the last thing I want to do is get that good, rich of input and not use it. Or not, and I know Teresa would get me the crew. The other thing I don't want to do is get 20 people sitting around the table with highlighters going, well, I came up with 20 times that word, you know. So K-State's working with us to make sure we have a high quality value. So when we come out, we want, so hopefully this summer, it'll go to the board, but we'll report back to you. And just talking with Randy, I imagine next fall sometime, we'll do, and we're working on the transmission of that church bus I found up in Ozaki. We'll hit the tour again and come out and share with you, is this what you agree that you were sharing with us? So, but again, the most important thing to me right now is to make sure we give the highest attention to the input that you gave us and make sure that we do it in a way that we're confident that we got what you said. And then we'll come back out and reassure, did we get it right? Susan, or is it just Bill?
No, each one first.
Oh, okay.
His slides are already up.
I know, but the closer you are to us, makes me smile. All right, Bill.
I thought Susan was going first, but I think we're going in alphabetical order. Okay, I'm going to be one of the most exciting things you hear this morning because I'm going to be really brief. I'm not going to keep you here any longer. I hope is that good? Really brief? Okay. I have some slides here I want to share with you, and I sent this to Susan the other day, and I saw a typo in there that I'd since corrected. I don't know if this is a new version or the old version, so this is not probably perfect. You Kentucky basketball fans can probably relate to that. Okay, I want to talk to you about accreditation. Here's the question that we get. What are we supposed to be doing, and what do we need to know? Well, first of all, we have an advisory council who's working on this. We have a lot of steps we have to go through. We've got to change some regulations. We've got to do some things. The good news is that unlike a lot of the initiatives in the state that we're required to do, this is a Kansas initiative, and so we're really going slow and trying to be very thoughtful here with all the input that you're giving us. So for 15-16, schools will continue to be accredited. You need to fill out the quality criteria collection that you do. So this is the question. What should we be doing now? No panic. No need to go out there and buy anything, reinvent anything, do a lot of data collection or anything. But what we're going to ask you to do is to start familiarizing yourself with some terms. The college career ready definition of the board, you know that, academic, cognitive, technical employability. Familiarize yourself with the Rose capacities. I think some of you have probably seen some of that in the paper. The legislature has talked about Common Core Rose capacities and where we are with that. How many of you are sort of familiar with the Rose capacities, what they are, the outcomes of that? Okay, so nothing really big there. Leadership in your districts, we're encouraging them to start familiarizing themselves with the 4 of the 5 R's. Not the last one, which is results. So that you know what's coming and what is actually in the rubrics. And as you do that, think about the college and career ready definition and the Rose capacities as they relate to those areas. And one of the things that we've really tried to do, similar to the way we approached evaluation, is to say whatever bits of evidence or however you're going to describe your district, how are you going to tell your story, right? That's what this is about. School improvement, what your district is like. You're all unique from one another in a lot of ways, and you have a few similarities, but what is your story? And so what's going to be included in the accreditation process, there'll be a few things. There'll be results, your graduation rates, some testing, some things like that. But the rest of it is your story. So what is it that we do in our district, and what are the pieces of evidence that tell our story? And I think that's a great approach and hopefully relieves a little anxiety, because when you are finally up for looking at being accredited, it's are you who you say you are, and how do you support the fact that these things are happening in our district as they relate to our story, who we are. Needs assessments, that's always a part of an initiative. So if you're sitting there thinking, well, do we have to do a new needs assessment? Do we have to start all over? The answer to that is no. If you're a focus school, priority school, KLN school, title school, you have strategic plans, if you've already gone down the road in identifying what your needs assessment might look like, then all you'll do in this area is just link the work that you've already done to this needs assessment. We're not going to ask everyone to have one that looks the same. If you need to do this process in developing a needs assessment, it's going to look very much like, I think, the evaluation of educators, where you'll do a self-assessment. I see myself as being in here and then here on the rubric, and you'll figure that out. Timeline. Kind of a rough timeline. Like I said, we have some permissions to get and some board approvals to get, but here's how it's looking right now. We'll be submitting some revisions this summer for some legal review. We'll present it to the board in November. We're hoping that in December they're ready to take some action. January through June, we want to be preparing you and giving you more information and training for implementation that will begin in July of 16. And then we'll identify groups. Actually, you will probably identify yourself as a group where we are in the cycle. The cycle will be a 5-year cycle, and we're not expecting, nor could we handle, everyone starting on the same day and having a 5-year cycle. We want that to be staggered. But the thought here is that some districts are a lot farther down the road in this, when you see all this information, where you are in the accreditation process. So in other words, if you're looking at and I'll show you a slide here in a second, if you're looking at 5 years in the cycle, you may look at what's listed there as what you need to do in year 1, and you might just be able to go through that and say, check, 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 we have that. Go to year 2, yep, check, check, we're good. Go to year 3, oops, there's where we are. So the first year of your 5-year cycle, you might be in the 3rd year. So in essence, the first time through, you're actually a 3-year cycle, but you've completed 5 years worth of work in the cycle. Does that make sense? And then some of you need more time. So, and then if you say, well, here's where we are and we're beginning in year 3, and it takes a little more time, and you've got to back up a little bit, then that's okay too. So that's how we see the staggering breaking out for the different groups. The Advisory Council has come up with these descriptors of accreditation: not accredited, accredited, conditional, and accredited. Now, there's been a lot of conversation about all the different types of performance levels that we could use, all the different descriptors for accreditation. The consensus seems to be the fewer the better. Now, if you say, well, if you're only accredited or not, then there's no expectation of rigor or of quality. Well, we have a higher respect for you than that. We know that's not the case. That the transparency of this and the way that you'll display all of this ultimately is for the public to see, and you telling your story, and so you'll have to make decisions about how rigorous your district is in maintaining your status of accreditation. The idea with the conditional accreditation is, it's hard to say you're accredited because maybe you have some things you haven't done yet that are the expectation of the accreditation model, but you're working on it and you're doing those things, so we don't want to say you're accredited or you're not accredited, because not accredited really won't be a true indication either of where you are in your district. So that's the thinking on a conditional. There are some things that you'll have to do that really aren't any different than what you're doing now, meaning licensure, physical accounting, IDEA, ESI requirements, all those things. Those are things that districts will need to do. There are foundational requirements that the advisory group has discussed, and they're minimal. These, I think the group, how many people in here, or is there anyone here that's on the advisory council, the QPA advisory council? So am I doing okay so far? All right. If I miss something, go like this, back up, and I'm going to walk over and hand you the mic. Okay? I'm happy to, by the way. So I'm not going to read these to you. This will be here later on today on our website, so you can have access to all of this in these slides, but there's nothing here that you're really not familiar with. Here's some thinking about meeting the foundational requirements. If you haven't met all of them, perhaps you're in that conditional for a little bit until you do meet those. Any of the individual foundational requirements also can be waived by the commissioner. Okay. Every district will have an outside validation team. And Brad alluded to this already. We don't want to fit everybody in a box and say everybody has to be advanced ed, everybody has to use Critical Friends, everybody has to be accredited by KSDE. So we'll be working through that and giving a lot of training on that. The outcomes and the expectations will all be similar, but that process and how you're getting there and who's looking and accrediting you or assisting you with crediting will likely be different. Here are the proposed steps, kind of in a very brief form. In year one, you'll look at your needs assessment and where you are with that, selecting goals, and then meeting, probably more identifying and starting a relationship with your outside validation team. One of the things that seems to be apparent is in a 5-year cycle, the outside validation team that you have at the beginning may not be entirely intact at the end. And how many people will be on your validation team? Are you a district where you can have 3 or 4 people? Or are you a very large district where you might have 8 or 10? And those are some decisions that you'll make, and we'll help you with some ideas about how to do that. Whoops, I don't know what I did. All right, there you go. Year 2, developing goals, plans, meeting with the chair can be virtual. Years 3 and 4, you're continuing to do your work. In year 5, you'll start wrapping up.
So what if your 612s are maybe at year 3 and 4 and your K5s are at year 1? How do you do that consistent with districts?
That's a great question. Brad, help. Brad, no. I think it's that has come up in some of our conversation that everybody is. If the buildings are actually contributing all this information to determine what the needs of the district are, so that we're credited at the district level, obviously you're going to have some buildings lagging behind. That may come into the conditional until you get things met. Every building isn't going to be perfect at the end of the cycle.
Repeat the question.
What if you're a larger district and your K5s are in year 1 and your 612s are 3 and 4? How do you place yourself with
The thinking right now is it's not necessarily the buildings. Where do you think the district is? And as a district, if your district has already gone through a needs assessment, let me use as an example. If you're a district that has a building in the KLN network, your district's already gone through the needs assessment, and you might believe you're already 3 years in a process because you may have buildings that are at different places, but as a district, we have some that are like, we're ready to go because we've been doing these things already. We're trying to design it in a manner that if you were doing nothing, a lot of districts that are getting good results have done these things. So that's where you would start. But a lot of districts are already 2-3 years into a process, so you may want to see, we've already done these things. So it's not necessarily where all your buildings are, it's where do we believe we are as a district. So.
Thanks. Okay, so the takeaways are this. You are going to be accredited at the district level. We're going to have a 5-year process. We are asking that this process be transparent. We don't want you to go out there and try to find other ways to tell your story about your district other than use the evidence that you have. And as a sideline to this, I'd like to share something with you that's sort of maybe a little infomercial. Is with the evaluation process, we have districts who are using Keep, McCrell, Danielson, Greenbush, E4E, and others. Some were electronic, some were paper. Some people used Keep, but Keep didn't work very well, the electronic database, and they were using, say, NetKimmy or somebody to do that. We have, as of today, we are finished with the software program that all of you in the state have been telling us, whether you're a Keep district or others, we need some system where we can edit, go forward, go back, do it any step we want, have complete control, run reports, and so on. I'm really happy to tell you today that we have such a system. And next week and the following week, we have 2 large groups of schools who are going to be looking at it and piloting it. We've already been showing them that. And if you are a district who uses your own system, you can take the software and put all your own rubrics in there and have the same process. If you are purchasing somebody else's system, you can put those rubrics in there. We have designed this so that if you want to use your evaluation tool for your school psychs and your speech pathologists and nurses and counselors, you can put all those rubrics in there so everyone will have the opportunity to use the same system. All the evidence and artifacts is right there easily displayed, and we're designing a system for accreditation to do the same thing. So that you go through the rubrics, you may have a drop down, you have options for evidence, you say that's the evidence that we have, you link to it, and it's all electronic. And who has permissions to see that or edit it, you will decide. So we're working really hard to give you the kind of tools and products you need. We think it's a lot less work than more work, and we'll be getting that out there. So how many of you currently are Keep districts and you use the Keep electronic database? I've apologized to you in the past for that. I don't have to do that anymore. You know, kind of tongue-in-cheek, I've been telling people that this is going to be so easy and seamless, we're thinking about making a Geico commercial about it. And I hope you'll find that's true. So watch, we're going to make this available to everybody in the state on May 1st. It's finished as of today, and next week we're running through it with some districts where, as a matter of fact, we have a training at KSDE with some larger districts in the area next Wednesday on the 15th. And on the 22nd, we're going up to McLeod and working with Troy and Jeff West, McLeod, Atchison, a couple of other districts to do that. So we don't want to give you something else that's more difficult. We want to give you a place to put all your stuff. We want to make the ease of use something that all of you can do. And we want to help you identify those good things that you already have so you're not having to do more work. And with that, I will be done. Isn't that exciting? I told you that was going to be the best part of your morning, right? I'm done. No, I'm really done. No, I'm done. Here. I was just trying to buy some time while Susan was walking up here. Okay, Susan, I don't know how to take this down or change. Pat, you'll help? Okay, thanks. They're really friendly today. Good luck with that.
Okay, licensure. We do have one topic we're going to talk about, but Jay already said there's been some questions about something, so I'll entertain, depending on the time, of some other questions. But today I'm going to talk about the mentoring requirements for licensure. Hopefully you're all aware about a change that has occurred. My goal today is not to train you on how to fill out that application. It's just to say, these are the requirements in their simplest form, and this is the timeline. So remember, or you should all know this, since May of 2008, you're supposed to provide a year of mentoring to those individuals on an initial license. And then at the end of that year of mentoring, you sign that infamous Form 21 that says, yep, this person was provided with mentoring, and here's the person who mentored them, and they sign off, they send it in, and they upgrade to the professional license. So that's been in place, 7 school years now? So what changed? What's new? The mentoring program that you deliver to that person on the initial license, we said you need to make sure that you've thought about some guidelines for that person, that you're not just doing an induction program showing them how to move through all of the systems in your district, but that you're really providing them some needed support to help them grow, because it's all about supporting that new person in that role and then making sure that they're growing in the simplest of terms. So the program you provide has to be based on established mentor guidelines, and we want to check that. So the program has to be approved that you meet those guidelines. So that's the new requirement in its simplest form. You do have to have that in place for the 15-16 school year. So, and this, I apologize, the slide, this makes more sense if you see the survey indicates that 95+% have said, yes, we provide mentoring. And we would hope it would be that much, because otherwise your initial license holders haven't been able to move up. So the bottom line is, the statistics are you're providing some mentoring already. Okay, so now what we're saying is, this is your choice how you address this. You can go ahead and adjust if you have to, that mentoring that you're already providing to make sure that it meets the guidelines. We're going to look at the guidelines in a couple more slides. Or you can go ahead and utilize a program that's been developed by another source, and you may already be doing that. A service center may be providing the mentoring program for you, but that's perfectly acceptable. We do expect you to complete the application regardless of whether you say, oh, we don't have any new educators on an initial license. We still want you to go through this process. Okay. Think similar to what we did with teacher leader evaluations. You had to submit, there were some guidelines you had to say, this is what we're doing, and then it was, yes, fine, that's great. Here's the timeline. The regulations went into effect in October. So we said, well, we have to develop the guidelines now, so we brought in work groups to develop those, and if you're interested in who were on those work groups, I think there's at least one person, anybody in the room that was on those work groups? There's a hand in the back. You could be proud of that. So they developed the guidelines. We had two groups, one to do the leader guidelines and one to do the teacher school specialist guidelines. And when it was all said and done and we compared them, they were, as you'll see, they're remarkably similar. So the high points, the main guidance, came out parallel. So then this spring we sent out a couple of notification heads up. This is coming. Here's the guidelines. Here's some basic explanations around the guidelines. And then last week we sent out a full guidance document. We sent out the information. Here's whether people are calling it a survey or an application. Here's what you have to fill out to submit for us to look and say, yes, your program addresses the guidelines. We're not going to give you an A or a B or a C or say, oh, that's not very good, you better fix that. All, again, think parallel to teacher leader evaluation approval process. Does what you're telling us about your mentor program meet what the guidelines expect? Okay, so by this summer, we'll start formally vetting those. So we want you to submit those programs by June 1st, and then that will give us a month to get back and notify you. Now, here's the good news. We already have a number of districts who said, I want to submit this. Will you kind of look at it, tell me, am I on the right track? That's helping us, because don't raise your hand and say, okay, do you have a rubric, or what exactly is your vetting process? It's helped us a lot to see how the districts who've already submitted something have responded to the questions that we're asking them to respond to. So we're still looking at it. We're working together to say, okay, that's enough to say yes, for us to tell that, yes, you're addressing the first guideline or the second guideline. So those samples that we're getting in now are really helping us. And then by this fall, after we notify you, then hopefully you'll be ready to start supporting those teachers on the initial licenses. And what will happen ultimately, that Form 21, it'll probably have an extra box that said, yes, this program was approved as meeting the guidelines. Okay? So what do those guidelines look like? I'm not going to read them in its entirety, but the first one on each set is all around, whoops, what did I do wrong here? Oh, well, we'll just go forward. How's that? It'll just be smaller. Okay, the first one is about making sure that that new teacher or school specialist is putting into practice those expectations around the learner and learning, content knowledge, instructional practice, professional responsibility. So do those things look familiar? Those are the core of the INTAS model standards, the professional ed standards for Kansas. Those should look like the constructs, those of you using KEEP or other evaluation instruments. So they're all around that same core set of expectations. And remember, the goal for this is especially that teacher coming out of a program in their first job, what is it that we want to do for them? We want to support them, get them through those first years or couple of years, and we want to make sure that they're growing so that at the end of the first few years, then we can say, yep, around these standards, you really are at the professional level. So that's what it's all about. Notice there's nothing that says, oh, and to do this, you have to do this and this and this and this. Okay, so as much flexibility as possible. The second guideline, even though that says number 1 again, you have to have some selection criteria and then provide some training for your mentors. It does say a selection criteria that has to have minimum of 3 years of experience and have that reach that professional level license. What doesn't it say? It doesn't say anything like if you're a math teacher, you have to be mentored by a math teacher, has to be in your building, and so forth. Again, as much flexibility as possible. The training, we do expect you to give that mentor some initial training, even if it's around, this is your role as a mentor. When we say you're a mentor, this is what you're responsible for doing. And then maybe you would say, then over the next 6 months, during this month, we're going to address, because when you see the full guideline text for this particular one, there are some bullets that say, we really expect you to train your mentor around these topics, okay? But again, flexibility, how you build that into your program. Third guideline, here's where it says, this is 1 year of structured mentoring and support, and we do expect that you communicate, there's some observation, and then there's some way to ensure that the mentor and mentee are having those good dialogues and feedbacks, okay? So again, minimal communication on a weekly basis. You decide, maybe your district wants to say, well, we expect you to meet face-to-face once a month, but the other weeks you can do it virtually. Maybe you want to ask your questions about how long should they spend in communicating, questions like that. And that full guidance document will help you as you fill out, answer the questions. It'll give you some guidance, some things to think about, some parameters that perhaps your district might want to set. Program provides a defined accountability system. That just means track this, make sure it's effective, your program is being effective. You define effectiveness at your own district level, so that's up to you, however you define effective. So those are the teacher school specialists, and again, you can see the parallel now on the leadership ones. The first one is all about putting into practice the professional standards, including the ISLIC, which are the equivalent to the INTAS standards for leaders. Selection criteria looks a little bit different, but again, hold a professional license. This is a little bit different in the mentoring area. So if you're mentoring a principal, we expect you to have a principal license, superintendent, a superintendent license at the professional level, and have 3 experience in that area that you're mentoring. So mentoring a principal, you have 3 years of experience as a principal as well as that professional level principal license. So this is a little bit of a shift. Then training criteria, this is much simpler than what the teacher one says. Addresses roles and processes, and you should provide that mentor with some coaching skills. again, that year of structured intensive support, and you can see the minimum requirements, 40 contact hours, including at least 3 face-to-face. Again, that's spread out over the year. We expect some professional interaction with colleagues, whether that means you send that new principal to a meeting like this. And then a documented plan, and I should have mentioned this on the teacher. Both of them say if that first-year teacher or administrator needs a little bit of extra support, have a plan in place about how you're going to provide that through the second year of mentoring. And then finally, again, a mechanism in place to evaluate the mentoring program. Okay. There is a mentoring website with the full guidance document, the survey or application. I guess people are calling it a survey. It's in SurveyMonkey, but it's really, we're calling it the application to get your program approved. So those are all available. And then we have people call that said, can I see the whole thing? Can I print it out? So what we did is we said, well, you can kind of walk through it if you want to, but the person who's monitoring this won't like that I said that, but you can dummy it and just put in a digit you need to move to the next page. So you can walk through it that way if you want, but don't tell her I said that. What we did, we pulled out the questions that you have to address, because when you see the survey, it's a question and then a text box, a question and a text box. So we pulled the questions out separately for you so that you can look at them and think about how you want to reply before you actually get into the survey. Because my understanding is once you do start, it will it won't save as you go, so you have to fill it in. Okay. So this is, the website is accessible. There's a tab if you, ksde.org, link to licensure, pull up our homepage. There's a mentoring tab across the top. There's also a link further down if you dig down deeper into the web page. So everything you need is on there, including that full guidance document. So questions on mentoring, basic requirements, the timeline. Yes. Yes, And, you know, the question is, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And Scott and I have kind of been having some conversations, and I said, well, do we just want, if a service center has a program, do they submit it, or do all the districts? It's, again, think parallel to teacher leader evaluation. We want some districts to say, I'm using this one, but then at some point we'll probably say, okay, you still have to submit the application, but you know, we've looked at this now, and if you're using this exact thing, it's okay. We're still working through the details of the vetting. I admit that, but other questions on the mentoring requirements? Yes?
So is this very much similar to what we used to have when they paid the mentors?
Not. Yeah. No. Here's from my viewpoint, knowing about that and remembering that. At one point, they passed some statute that said, "Oh, we're going to give you money that went to the mentor," and then they said, "But you have to meet these criteria." So then, what got put into place was more what I would call procedural kind of requirements. And yes, there were some things around who can you choose as a mentor to get this money, but I saw those as more procedural. This is more about really providing the support that somebody new to that position needs. And so let's look at the guidelines. Let's be more methodical about this. So that's how I see it. This is the quote best practices piece that we all should be supporting. Yeah, no, that's come up, and that's the difference, because people say, I kind of remember some rules or something a while back about mentoring, and that's what that was about. And those are kind of dormant because we haven't given you money, and we never had enough money in the first place for that full program. Other questions? Okay, thank you.
Oh, she wants to know if you have any other licensing. Just kidding. So, all right, well, I think it's lunchtime. As normal, lunch is in the back. Oh, let me look at the agenda. Was there something before lunch?
Hi, right before you head for lunch, we'd like to take this time to honor some of our own. I'm Karen Brock. I'm serving as the president of KSDE this year. And with me is Christy Meyer, and she is the incoming president. And we'd like to take a moment of your time to introduce a couple of our award winners. And we like to, like I say, honor our own. And this year, we have two worthy recipients. And the first is Amber Hopman as KSDE's 2015 Outstanding Educator. Amber graduated from Kansas State in 2007 with a bachelor's degree in math and began her teaching and coaching career in Garnett at Anderson County Junior-Senior High School. She currently teaches math and coaches at Washburn Rural High School here in Topeka. She also serves on district curriculum committees and professional learning communities. KSCD is proud to name Amber as our 2015 Outstanding Educator. Amber? She wants your picture. Okay, next, I would like to announce our Outstanding Curriculum Director Award. 2015, we are naming Dr. Valora Hanslacek as KSCD's Outstanding Curriculum Director, or I guess it says leader on the plaque. All right, Dr. Valora Hanslacek has been in education for 25 years. Valora earned a Bachelor of Education from Washburn University, a Master's in K-12 Administration from Northwest Missouri State University, and her Doctorate in Educational Leadership from K-State. Dr. Hanslacek's first and only full-time teaching job was with the Easton Public Schools, while her first administrative job was at Midway Schools, now Downifin West, as a 612 principal. She worked at Midway Schools 2 years before moving to the assistant superintendent role at USD 441 Sabetha, which is now USD 113 Prairie Hills, where she has worked for 16 years. Her career has also included teaching as an adjunct professor for Baker University and Newman University in the areas of curriculum, assessment, and instruction. Valora currently serves on the Accreditation Advisory Council for KSDE and the Nemaha County United for Youth Countywide Board. She's the Sabetha High School SAD sponsor, and when asked, she will tell you she has a passion for school improvement, curriculum work, and kids. We're honored to give this award to Dr. Hanslacek. Now you can eat.